What if the most powerful military on Earth, a force with aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, and trillion-dollar defense budgets, walked into a war it didn't fully understand? What if the man who promised zero wars launched one of the most consequential military campaigns in a generation? And what if, just days in, the cracks are already showing? That's exactly where we are right now. The Middle East is on fire. American jets are bombing Tehran. Iranian ballistic missiles are raining down on Gulf states. Oil prices are spiking, and Washington, the self-proclaimed leader of the free world, is struggling to answer one basic question: what are we actually doing here? This is the story of Operation Epic Fury, Donald Trump's gamble in Iran, and why it may already be unraveling. Let's go back to February 28, 2026. President Trump appears in a video address on Truth Social and announces that American forces have begun, in his words, major combat operations in Iran. Alongside Israel, the United States launched a massive air and sea campaign targeting Iran's missile infrastructure, naval forces, nuclear sites, and command and control systems. Trump called it a historic moment. He said the U.S. had given Iran every opportunity to negotiate, every chance to walk away from its nuclear ambitions, and Tehran had refused every single time. On paper, it sounded decisive, it sounded strong, it sounded like exactly the kind of thing Trump's supporters had always admired about him: bold, unapologetic, America first. But here's the thing: 3 days in, and the situation is already far messier than the White House projected. Let's start with the most uncomfortable question. Why is America actually in this war? Because the answer keeps changing, and that alone should tell you something. Day one, the justification was Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. had already hit 3 nuclear facilities back in June 2025, Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, with bunker-busting bombs dropped by B-2 stealth bombers. Trump said those sites were obliterated, but a November 2025 White House document quietly admitted the strikes had only significantly degraded the program. Not destroyed, degraded. Iran had reportedly been rebuilding, so the nuclear threat was back on the table. Day 2, the narrative shifted to regime change: bring democracy to Iran, end the Islamic Republic, liberate the Iranian people. Day 3, the defense secretary said the real goal was to degrade Iran's missile capabilities, not regime change, not nukes specifically, just missiles. Then comes a statement from the Joint Chiefs saying the mission was to prevent Iran from threatening its neighbors. And then, and this is where it gets truly extraordinary, Secretary of State Marco Rubio goes on record and essentially admits, "We attacked Iran because Israel was going to attack Iran first. And if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would retaliate against American forces, so the U.S. struck first, preemptively, on behalf of Israel, to prevent a chain reaction that Israel itself had set in motion." Read that again. The United States launched a war because of what Israel was planning to do. Former U.S. ambassadors and security analysts are now openly saying what critics have whispered for years, that American Middle East policy isn't made in Washington, it's made in Tel Aviv. And this war is the most visible proof of that yet. Even within Trump's own base, the anger is real. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the most vocal Trump loyalists in Washington, posted on social media, "This is not what we thought MAGA was supposed to be." His own supporters voted for America first and zero wars. They didn't vote for this. Now let's talk about what's happening on the ground, because the military picture is not what the White House is selling. Trump told the American people that the war would last 4 to 5 weeks. He said the U.S. had, and I quote, "virtually unlimited weapons stockpiles." He said America could fight this war forever if it needed to. But his military is saying something very different behind closed doors. Here's what we actually know. During the original 12-day war in June 2025, the U.S. fired over 150 THAAD interceptor missiles to shoot down Iranian ballistic missiles. That was roughly 25% of the entire global THAAD stockpile, gone in less than 2 weeks. And that was just the warm-up. Now we're in round 2, and Iran has made very clear it is not holding back. Iranian ballistic missiles and drones have hit targets in Israel, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and Iraq. U.S. embassies in Riyadh and Kuwait have been attacked and shut down. American citizens across the Middle East have been told to evacuate, but with no guidance on how and no military assistance to get them out. Bloomberg analysts are warning that interceptor missiles in the UAE could run dry within a week. Qatar's defenses may last 4 days. Meanwhile, Iranian military commanders are on record saying they have months of missile supply remaining, and that what we've seen so far is just the opening salvo.
There's also the question of American aircraft. On March 1st, 3 F-15 fighter jets were damaged or destroyed in what the Pentagon called a friendly fire incident in Kuwait. Iran claims its S-300 air defense systems were responsible. Whatever the truth is, losing 3 advanced fighter jets in a single incident is not a footnote. That's a headline. And it raises serious questions about how well this operation was actually planned. The Pentagon had already spent an estimated $1.5 billion just positioning carrier strike groups and naval assets in the region before a single bomb was dropped. Now, with the war expanding, analysts are flagging a dangerous reality. The U.S. is burning through high-end interceptor missiles at an extraordinary rate, and replenishing them takes months, not days. Then there's the leadership vacuum in Tehran, and this is one of the most volatile and under-discussed aspects of the entire crisis. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has reportedly been killed in an Israeli strike. Iran's senior military and political leadership has been decimated. And on the surface, you might think that's a victory. No leader, no chain of command, no one to give orders, so the missiles stop flying, right? Wrong. Iran had already anticipated this scenario. It implemented what analysts are calling a decentralized mosaic defense system, essentially a distributed military structure where individual units have the authority and capability to operate independently without waiting for orders from the top. Iran's own foreign minister has publicly confirmed that military units are currently operating outside of central command. What this means in practice is terrifying. Even if the U.S. wanted to negotiate a ceasefire tomorrow, there is no one to call. There is no one sitting in a room in Tehran with the authority to say stand down. The missiles keep flying because the system was designed to keep flying, even after the leadership is gone. This is not a bug, it's a feature, and Washington never fully gamed it out. Let's talk about oil, because whatever happens militarily, the economic consequences are already here, and they are global. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20 to 21 billion barrels of oil pass every single day, is now effectively blockaded. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have declared it closed and threatened to set fire to any vessel attempting to pass. Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, has suspended operations. European natural gas prices have jumped more than 50% since the conflict began, and Brent crude is already above $80 per barrel, with analysts warning it could surge toward $120 or even $150 if the conflict continues. For the United States, rising oil prices means rising inflation at a time when the economy was already under pressure. For Europe, it means an energy crisis not seen since the worst days of the Russia-Ukraine war. And for countries like India, which imports more than half of its crude oil from the Middle East, the math is stark. A 20 to 25-day buffer stock before supply disruptions start hitting fuel prices, transportation costs, and food inflation. The rupee weakens, the trade deficit widens, and ordinary people pay the price. This isn't a side effect of the war, it is the war. There's also a wild card that deserves serious attention: the Saudi factor. Saudi Arabia's critical oil infrastructure, the Aramco processing facilities, was struck by a missile early in the conflict. Initially, fingers were pointed at Iran, but Riyadh launched its own investigation, and here's what's quietly emerging. Iran may not have fired that missile. Iran has explicitly denied striking Saudi infrastructure, calling the Saudis their brothers in the Muslim world. So if Iran didn't do it, who did?
One theory gaining traction among analysts is that Israel may have carried out the strike to drag Saudi Arabia into the conflict on the anti-Iran side. If Riyadh concludes that Israel bombed its oil fields and blamed Tehran, the entire coalition calculus in this war flips overnight. Saudi Arabia's allegiance, its oil leverage, its diplomatic relationships, all of it becomes a different equation. The investigation is ongoing, but the implications are explosive. Now let's get to the hardest question of all. How does this end? There are really only two paths forward, and neither of them is clean. The first option is a total air campaign. Bomb Iran continuously, systematically, relentlessly, until every last missile launcher in every mountain and every province is destroyed, until Iran physically cannot fire back. This would be extraordinarily expensive, extraordinarily bloody, and could take months. Iran is not a small country. It has a sophisticated network of underground facilities, dispersed launch sites, and a military that has spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of attack. Even with all of America's firepower, analysts say this approach would require a level of sustained commitment that would make Afghanistan look short. The second option is negotiation. But here's the paradox America has created for itself. You've killed the leadership. You've decentralized the military. There is no central authority left to negotiate with. You can't call a ceasefire if there's no one on the other end of the phone. Iran has nothing left to lose. A nation that has been bombed, humiliated, and stripped of its leadership doesn't sit down at a negotiating table from a position of weakness. It fights. History has shown us this again and again. In Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan. When a government is destroyed, but the will to resist isn't, you don't get peace. You get an insurgency. You get a war of attrition that drags on for years, bleeding the invading power dry, financially, militarily, and politically. UAE and Qatar understand this. Both countries are privately pressuring Washington to find an off-ramp. China, which buys roughly 80% of Iranian oil, is urging Tehran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open while simultaneously refusing to get militarily involved. Everyone around this conflict can see the trap. The question is whether Washington can see it too. Let's bring it back to the man at the center of all of this, Donald Trump. This is the president who ran on ending stupid wars, who promised his supporters he would be a peacemaker, not a warmonger, who said America first meant staying out of other people's conflicts. He is now the president who has authorized military strikes on 7 countries. He launched a war without congressional approval. He did so, by his own Secretary of State's admission, largely to protect Israel from the consequences of an Israeli decision. And he did it with no clear exit strategy, no unified objective, and no plan for what comes after. A CNN poll taken after the strikes began found that nearly 60% of Americans disapprove of the decision to attack Iran. A Reuters Ipsos poll puts approval of the military campaign at around 30%. These are not partisan numbers. These are Americans, including many Trump voters, who are asking a simple question: what are we doing, and how do we get out? The New York Times has reported that Trump dragged America into this conflict without an exit strategy. His own intelligence community had warned him that Iran was years away from having missiles capable of reaching the United States, yet that claim became a centerpiece justification for the war. His own White House documents contradicted his claim that Iran's nuclear sites were obliterated in June 2025. The gap between the story being told and the reality on the ground is growing wider by the hour. Here's where we stand right now, 4 days into Operation Epic Fury. American soldiers are dying. 6 confirmed U.S. military deaths, with that number expected to rise. Hundreds of civilians in Iran, including schoolgirls, have been killed. 11 Iranian warships have been sunk. Iran has struck multiple U.S. military assets across the Gulf. American embassies are closed. American citizens in the Middle East have been told to fend for themselves. Oil prices are climbing toward historic highs. And a country of 90 million people, whose leadership has been killed and whose military has been unleashed without a chain of command, is firing missiles in every direction, with no one able to call them off. This was supposed to be quick. It was supposed to be clean.
It was supposed to be the kind of decisive American action that sends a message to the world. Instead, it is beginning to look like every other intervention America has ever regretted. The trap is set. The question now is whether anyone in Washington has the clarity and the courage to find a way out before the cost becomes catastrophic for everyone. Stay tuned. This story is far from over.